Hi, everybody. It feels like it's been hi. Feels like it's been a while since I've done this. I don't actually think it's been that long, but time is kind of weird right now. It's almost like it moves in slow motion, but really rapidly at the same time. Um, Most of you know, and have been following along, that we have been working through a series on holy habits that Steve's been leading us on. When I was asked to speak this week, Steve told me I could choose what I wanted to speak on. And that sounds like a lot of freedom, and it kind of sounds like it might make things easier, but it's actually pretty hard for me. I don't usually work that way when I'm preaching. I'm much more comfortable actually taking a prescribed passage and usually just following it right after the one that came the week before and digging into the text, finding the background and the context and doing my historical homework, and then kind of applying those findings and those sorts of things to today. That's actually a lot easier for me. So this is different. This isn't quite that. And I hope you'll be patient with me. Um, I'm going to take this a little bit as an opportunity to share with you some of the things that have been going on with me, and also working with Psalm 33 a bit, because it holds a really great reminder for me, and I think for all of us. Um, so I'm gonna read the passage. I'm gonna read Psalm 33 right now quickly, and then sort of jump into the rest of it. Shout for joy in the Lord, O you righteous. Praise befits the upright. Give thanks to the Lord with the lyre. Make melody to him with the harp of 10 strings. Sing to him a new song. Play skillfully on the strings with loud shouts. For the word of the Lord is upright, and all his work is done in faithfulness. He loves righteousness and justice. The earth is full of the steadfast love of the Lord. By the word of the Lord the heavens were made, and by the breath of his mouth all their host. He gathers the waters of the sea as a heap. He puts the deeps in storehouses. Let all the earth fear the Lord. Let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. For he spoke, and it came to be. He commanded, and it stood firm. The Lord brings the counsel of the nations to nothing. He frustrates the plans of the peoples. The counsel of the Lord stands forever, the plans of his heart to all generations. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, the people whom he has chosen as his heritage. The Lord looks down from heaven, and he sees all the children of man. From where he sits enthroned, he looks out on all the inhabitants of earth. He who fashions the hearts of them all and observes all their deeds. The king is not saved by his great army. A warrior is not delivered by his great strength. The war horse is a false hope for salvation, and by its great might it cannot rescue. Behold, the eye of the Lord is on those who fear him, on those who hope in his steadfast love, that he might deliver their soul from death and keep them alive in famine. Our soul waits on the Lord. He is our help and our shield, for our heart is glad in him, because we trust in his holy name. Let your steadfast love, O Lord, be upon us, even as we hope in you. Just a couple quick observations about that. That is a powerful psalm that just mostly talks about God's majesty and God sort of being God. Um, and I I love that. Um, it's not necessarily cheerful. It's not. It doesn't feel safe to me. Um, it very much underscores God's power and his majesty, and how above everything he is, in the best way. Um, and I also love how at the end of the psalm, it starts talking about our soul waiting for the Lord. Our heart is glad in him. Um, and it's written from the context of Israel, of this nation, speaking that out, as a collective, but it works just as well, as us, the body of Christ, saying that collectively together. Uh, this is our body that we're all a part of, with Christ as the head, and our heart, our soul waits for the Lord. Um, for our heart together is glad in him, because we trust in his holy name. And I love that. I find that so encouraging, and that it weaves us all together like that is beautiful. Um, okay, so I'm going to talk about me a little bit now, as long as that's okay with everybody. 2020 was a weird year. I think probably everyone has felt that, and that's kind of continued on into 2021. But so last year, 2020, I was planning on finishing my master's last year, which did not happen. Uh, I also had the thought too that, with my dad stepping down, and the pastoral transition we stepped into, uh, it kind of looked like for a bit that maybe some of the people who we already had on staff would take up some more of my dad's role, and that, I did have this thought, maybe there would be some sort of hole that I could step into a little bit, that, maybe there was a bit of a role that might be there for me. But with COVID hitting like it did, that was never even really an option. We even had to cut back on the staff that we had at the time, and that was really hard to see. That was really hard to see that happening to the people who we, uh, had working for us. It was really hard to just watch happening within our church. Um, but it was also selfishly, a little bit, uh, sad for me too. I was kind of looking at that, and yeah, thinking in that direction a little bit. Like a lot of people, I had my hours cut back on the job I was working pretty quickly after COVID started coming in. The restrictions went up, and I ended up going on the, Canadian Emergency Revenue Benefits, the CERB or CURB. Still not really sure how to say that. Um, and I also found that I was having a much harder time keeping up with my schoolwork, after COVID and all the restrictions began, to the point that I essentially just put all of it on hold. I didn't have the capacity to keep going with it. And around that same time, um, that I was starting to falter badly with school, I began to think about what I would do once I was finished with school. And I was looking into that, and I started to worry. I looked into the future as far as I could tell, and there wasn't going to be anything in the way of any sort of paid role with Uptown, that would be available that I could slot into in the near future. And I love this church, and I love the people here, and I love the staff team and the leadership team. And I think that we have really great people in each of the roles that they're in. And I don't want to go to church somewhere else. Um, and at that time, though, I was looking at these things, and what I could see was that I was about to finish my second degree, both of which I only really ever pursued in order to be able to step into ministry, in as large a capacity as I could. And I had made it a policy of mine not to take any jobs that required availability on Sunday mornings, because I felt really strongly that I ought to prioritize being at church. Um, that was hard because, a lot of jobs that are not full time, because I was in school. They want you to be available on weekends, and a lot of them require you to be available on Sundays. Um, and I had been volunteering with a lunchtime feeding program on Fridays. It's called Lunch Chat. I've mentioned it before. I've mentioned it a lot before. I'd been doing that for a couple of years at that point, and I'd turned down work that had overlapped with that time slot because I felt like God was doing something there, and that I really wanted to be a part of it. And I felt like uh, I should be a part of it, and that God was using me there in a good way. Um, and then going back before I'd started school again, I had been splitting my time between being in Mexico as a missionary and being here and working and saving up so that I could be in Mexico as a missionary. Um, and so I was looking at where I was, and I saw that, and I saw that there wasn't a role for me to step into. And I started feeling, well, I panicked a little. Um, and I started feeling a little bitter. Uh, and I felt like the training I was getting was maybe being overlooked, and I felt like I had been ready to step into something more for a while. And I felt like I was not getting much support, and I started feeling bitter. And then I started feeling silly about that, um, because I could see what was going on inside me, and I could see myself start to feel entitled and wrong done by. And I knew those things were not appropriate, and they're not helpful, and they weren't fair to the people around me who were in these roles to which they were well suited. And most importantly, I knew that was not what God would want from me. And so I started to actively try and work against those feelings. Um, but as summertime kind of came around, that feeling of worry about not having anything to step into once I finished my degree stuck with me. Um, and I was dealing with a lot of the rest of it. I wasn't feeling bitter. I didn't really feel very bitter for very long, but it was something that I saw. Uh, I was working on the rest of it, but that feeling of worry stuck with me. And I had been looking for jobs before that, but as summer began, I began to make it really a priority. Um, and I began to feel like I just needed to find something related to ministry where I could put what I had been learning in school and the experience I had from Lunch Hut and from Mexico into practice. And I wanted the chance to do it with as much of my time as possible, not just as much of my time as I could manage around a pre-existing work schedule. So I started applying for everything that I could find that it was remotely related. I was applying for job postings from other churches, though there weren't many of those. And the church jobs that were posted were nearly all focused on bookkeeping or leading worship, which is interesting. Um, but I'm not an accountant. I do my own taxes, but even that is very near the limit of my ability in that area. And I love music, and I've played with our worship band here at Uptown, but I'm a very limited musician, and I don't have a singing voice really at all. Um, so I kept applying for jobs, and I applied for jobs in other areas too. I finally got a call back in August. I had applied for hundreds of jobs by that point, but the interview I got was with a job. It was for a job with a real estate company located in Vancouver, which is weird because that doesn't seem like it would be a good fit. Um, but they were looking for someone to set up and run a social initiative using some of the empty units they had at the time. And I ended up getting the job. So I sort of started making connections with different organizations around Vancouver who were doing similar things. And I ended up connecting with one of the housing managers at Union Gospel Mission, which was good because I was laid off less than a month into the job, and the guy who I'd connected with, he helped me get on with UGM, and that's where I am now. I've been working with UGM since October, and I feel really good about it. And I feel good about how things have fit together with that. I'm glad that I landed with an organization and not another church because I would have missed Uptown so much. And I have not felt like it was time to leave. So this is good. Um, God has very clearly been working things out with that. Um, I'm going to give a little bit of a warning here. As I keep going through this, I'm going to get into some things that are um, a little brutal, and some of it's going to be difficult. So I guess this is a trigger warning, and a bit of a parental warning if you've got kids around who are listening. Some of the stuff you might not want them listening to. Um, I tried to tone it down and make it, acceptable and appropriate, but some of this is, you know, fairly involved content. So um, one little bit in particular. So I'll give you another warning when that's coming up, but I just wanted to let you guys know. Um, so with this new job, I've mostly been working night shifts, and at the beginning of this year, actually, I was moved into a more fixed shelter worker position. And I was kind of more floating around playing different roles before. But this new position is really nice because my days off are all grouped together now, which wasn't the case before. My schedule is consistent each week, and it's been great. Um, it's also challenging. The UGM location I'm working at is in the downtown east side, and we tend to end up being around a significant amount of trauma. If you've not visited the DTES, the downtown east side, it would probably be uncomfortable the first time walking around the neighborhood. Uh, you'd likely see multiple people actively partaking in various illicit substances quite freely on the sidewalks, for example. Um, had the opportunity to go on call them street walks. Essentially, you couple employees from UGM will just walk around the neighborhood a bit and look for people we know to connect with, and just kind of be around. Sometimes we've got extra food that we'll give out to people, that sort of thing. But you see it all over, just on the main streets. It's really uh, it's pretty shocking if you're not ready for it. Um, but yeah, on my second week on the job, I'm just going to tell a couple stories here from the job so far. My second week on the job, I was working the front desk shift overnight, um, and a little before 6 in the morning. So getting near to the end of my shift, um, got a call on the radio from one of my coworkers asking for help, and I knew where he was, so I rushed over to where I knew he was stationed, uh, and I found him standing near a person laying on the ground just outside of our building with a purple face. Um, so I recognized that as an overdose. He knew it was an overdose too. That's why he was calling for help. So I ran inside and called 911 while I was going to get a naloxone kit, which is what they use to treat opioid overdoses. Um, so I ran inside, called 911, grabbed that, and I ran back out to where he was. And I started opening up the kit, and I asked him, I'm like, "Hey, have you used one of these before? Do you know how to use this?" And he said no. And I had I had luckily in my first week, one of the supervisors overnight had described to me what to do. I never actually used it before, but he kind of told me. So essentially, there's a little vial. You break the cap off. You stick the syringe in. You fill the syringe, and then you're supposed to flip it upside down and get the air out, and then inject the person. Um, so I knew the theory, and I was like, okay. My coworker looked a little panicked. He was kind of standing wide-eyed a little bit. He took a step or two back from me as I was asking him if he knew how to do it. And he said no. Um, and so I was like, okay, I'm doing this. Um, and so that's what I did. I broke it off, filled the syringe, and yeah, I ended up injecting the guy. And I was on the phone with 911 the whole time. Um, and so paramedics came and showed up shortly after I had injected him. I only injected him once, and they took over from there. I found out later that that guy who had overdosed there was actually a regular guy that came in during the night shifts, and I'd met him several times already at that point. Um, and he made it. He's okay. I've seen him since, talked to him since. He doesn't remember any of that going on, which isn't surprising. But yeah, it was quite a quite an experience. Second week on the job. Um, for my new regular shift now, I work in the overflow emergency shelter. So the way we have things set up is we have 72 beds set up in the second story of the building in our permanent shelter for guys to be able to stay in there. And usually you can stay for 1 month in, and then you have to spend another month somewhere else. And that's designed to try and encourage guys to be working with our case managers on getting more permanent housing, to encourage them that this shelter is supposed to be temporary for you. We'd like to see you move into somewhere better than this. Um, we haven't been doing that during COVID just because with with COVID going on, it's been a lot harder for people to get into more permanent housing. So shelters have been extra full, and we also have opened up an area downstairs on the first floor where we lay out 20 mats on the ground in sort of a multi-purpose area. So I work downstairs in that multi-purpose area with the guys on the mats. That's my station. So we got two people upstairs, one person downstairs doing that. So one night, just this past week actually, a young kid in his early 20s, I think he's actually 23. He came around to the side door where I'm located, and he's banging on the door. I've got all the guys sleeping in there right inside that door, and so don't want people banging on the door and waking people up. And I went, and I recognized him. I knew who he was. He'd stayed with us before, so I opened the door a little bit. And I just kind of stepped halfway out, and I was like, "Hey, um, you, we're actually closed up here right now. You got to go in through the front." So I kind of directed him to go around to the front of the building, and he was like, "I was already there." And I was like, "Well, that's where the intake is right now. Like, I can't let you in through the side." So he turned and he ran up the street, taking off towards the front. And I stepped back inside. I had been having a conversation with someone, so I went back to that conversation. Um, and I don't think we got more than a few sentences further in that conversation before he was back and he was banging on the doors again. Um, and so I went back and I opened the door again. I just kind of stepped halfway out like before. And I started talking to him a little bit, and he said, "Hey, like they wouldn't let me in." Uh, and I said, "Well, why was that? Maybe was it because you're banging on those doors like you're banging on these ones? Because if the person who's working on the front thinks that the person outside could be threatening or dangerous, they'll sometimes not open the doors for them. Um, and so he was like, no, 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 I wasn't doing that. I think he probably was doing that, but he said he wasn't. And I was like, okay, well, I can't let you in through here. Uh, Things have to run through the person at the front right now. But you know, if he's not going to let you in, then I can help. I can give you directions to another shelter close by. Um, it's usually not full, so you'll probably be able to get in there. And he says to me, he's getting quite angry, quite upset. He's like, no, I've already been kicked out of everywhere else. You need to let me in here. And I said, listen, I'm not letting you in through these side doors. You have to go around through the front. And at that point, he quickly swung and punched me in the face. Um, and it was surprising and a little weird. And I said to him actually at the time, I was like, I'm still not letting you in. Like you just hit me in the face. Like I'm not. This isn't helping you. This isn't helping you get access here right now. Um, and he kind of set up like he was going to do it again. So I went to close the door. He grabbed the door and he's trying to pull it open. And so at that point, I was just like, okay, well, I'll just radio for someone to come and give me a hand. So I just kind of stood in the doorway and let him kind of open it and stood in the way. And I radioed for help. Uh, and once I radioed for help, he kind of paused for a moment, like he was ready to fight, and then he turned and he ran. Um, Clearly didn't want to deal with more people. But it was really sad. Um, I mean, it was fine. He's not a big guy. I wasn't really hurt. Um, yeah, that was kind of just the end of it. Um, like I said, it wasn't a big deal, but yeah, it was weird and it was sad. It was very clear the desperation that was there. You know, I'm sure he knew that that wouldn't help. I'm sure he knew that wouldn't somehow lead to me changing my mind and letting him in the building. But it really shows the desperation that's there. And this is a young guy. He's a kid. To see a kid in that state, that desperate, it was just really sad to see. Um, so here's the other part of the warning. This part is the part that may be uh, difficult or triggering, or if you've got kids around, maybe you don't want them listening to this part. Just a few weeks ago, while I was at work, right near the end of my shift, I was upstairs and we got a message on the radio asking for help from downstairs. And my supervisor went down to make sure that things were okay. And eventually he kind of came back up. And then we got a radio call about 20 minutes later asking for me to come down if I could cover the front desk for a bit. Um, and what had happened was that a guy who was living in the building across the street uh, had thrown some large objects out the window of his second story room, um, like breaking the window, throwing them through, and then he came out onto the street naked and bloody and carrying a large sword. Um, and so part of that had been going on. That's why some of my coworkers have been calling for help on the radio, and they went down. Just, you know, he's not in our building. He wasn't being a threat to anyone inside or anything, but you know, it's a concerning situation, and it's right outside for us. Um, and the police were called, um, and yeah, they showed up, and eventually, this guy was just walking towards the police, but carrying this sword, naked and bloody, and not stopping, walking towards them. Uh, he was eventually shot 4 times in the chest, and he died there, just out on the street, in the intersection right outside of our work. And I had coworkers who were there outside the whole time trying to figure out what to do, and how to help before the police came, and who were there and saw everything right up to the end. Uh, One of them is on leave right now, after watching that. The other one was very shaken up, and he's a tough guy. He's been working in the downtown east side for years and years, uh, like 10 plus years. But that shook him. Uh, that was hard. Uh, and so I was down there just kind of covering for some of the people who saw things and who were filling out police statements and who were involved. Um, and the last few weeks, I've been having conversations with people. And I've been talking with my coworkers. I've been checking in with them, especially the ones who were there, who witnessed that. And the night after that happened, I mentioned to the shelter guests that were downstairs that I was working with that, if any of them wanted to talk about any of that, then I would be available. And one of them who was out there, who saw the whole thing, front to back, he came into the office to talk to me. And so he and I talked, and he was angry. He was angry at the man who died, and he was angry at God over the whole thing and over everything else that is wrong in the world that he can see. And it's easy to see a lot of it when you're homeless and when you're living, in that area in particular. Um, and he told me about it. And we talked for, about 2 hours about it all. Well, he did most of the talking, and while that was going on, I listened, and I thought to myself about how I could answer him. I thought about what I learned in school, and about the things that I had spent so many hours thinking about on my own, theological answers I really believe and that I think work and make sense. Things like how, Jesus says there are no good people, only the Father is good. And so actually it's God's mercy that we experience goodness at all in life. But in that conversation and in the conversations I've had with people the last few weeks, conversations where people, have been expressing to me that there's, these empty feelings, uh, or where I'm hearing phrases like, what's the point? Uh, those sorts of answers just seem to fall a little flat. They aren't enough when they come up against the brutality of life and death that this world sometimes throws at us, and for some of us throws at us constantly. And so in these conversations I've been having in the last few weeks, having so often the last few weeks, I've kept coming back to one thing in particular. When I've been asked things like, what's the point? Which I think can be answered a lot of ways really well, though those answers feel insufficient somehow right now. When I've been asked why is this going on? Why was I there? Why did I have to see all of that? My answer has largely been, I don't know. I don't know. And I don't know what to do about it or exactly how all of this works out. But I believe that God does. And I believe that it will be taken care of. And I don't know why it hasn't been yet. but I know that I don't know what God is waiting for, but I trust him with it because he's God and I'm not. Because Jesus said that he would come back and that when he does, he'll put things right. And I don't have any answer better than that I will trust him to do that. So this psalm from today, Psalm 33, is a good reminder for me with this. It's a reminder that God is God and I'm not. We aren't. And we can trust him because of that, because he is God. It talks about the fear of the Lord. And even I think about the sheer power and the danger in the imagery when it talks about God gathering the waters of the sea into a heap. Nothing about that sounds safe to me. That sounds like a storm at sea. That's part of what makes God God. And it reminds me that those things that seem so dangerously out of my control, so dangerously out of our control, including other people, they aren't out of control for God. He isn't, and he doesn't stop being who he is. And he can still be trusted with all of it. He is handling all of it, from the relatively minor worries that I was fixated on last summer to the difficult conversations from the last few weeks. He's got it. That's good because I don't. And so, to him who is able to do more than we ask and is already working on things beyond anything we can imagine, we give thanks. And in him we place our trust because we are convinced that nothing, neither death nor life, nor COVID nor isolation, neither addictions nor trauma nor brutality, no things present nor any things yet to come will ever be able to separate us from the love of God, Jesus Christ our Lord. That's our hope as Christians. That's what we believe. That's what I believe. That's what I fall back on. It's okay not to know. It has to be okay not to know because I don't know a lot. It's okay not to have the answers. I think it's okay not to know how it all works or fits together or what's going to happen or how to deal with any of it. We know that it will all be taken care of in the end. That is our hope, our eternal hope. And our hope is not in human beings. Our faith is not in people. It is in Christ. It is in God. And we can trust God. That rope will hold. That's what I've got for this morning. That's where I end up. That's what I think this psalm is an excellent reminder of.